The town of Farmington. Respecting history, planning the future.
And it's even like this whole thing with this ECS, they've made it as complicated as they possibly could.
Last number. I mean, honestly, every time I've got the last number.
Yeah, they just have made it as complicated as they can.
But, to give you an example of how confusing it can get, that ECS grant, last year that we were talking about a big reduction in our grant at the last minute, when the council came back and made adjustments to the budget before it went to the annual town meeting. And there was indications we were going to get a higher amount than what we actually budgeted. I think we were supposed to be over $1.2 million. The council was conservative and kept and budgeted for this year 1.181. And everybody said, well, that's too low. You're going to get more money than that. And if you look right in that box, that's what we're actually going to receive. So we're actually going to receive less than what we budgeted and less than what was indicated to us, because during the course of the year, things happen that affect what your grants could be. Even after the state budget is settled, there could be changes. The state had a problem. The state needed to reduce expenses, so they cut part of the ECS grant. Then there was audit adjustments. So again, it just there's no real reliability any longer with grants. You have to be really careful and be conservative in budgeting for them.
Joe, on that note, and I know no one has a crystal ball, and this is actually for all of you, and because you're more on the ground, moving forward in the future. I mean, Nancy and I were cynical last year and the year before, I think. Is this going to be slowly chipped away, like what would you recommend long-term? Because I mean, you're paying more attention. You're hearing what's going on at the legislature, because we need to start planning.
Right. And I think we've talked about it as a council, is that if for some reason, which I don't think will happen, but I think we just, even so next year, this is a 30% reduction. So let's say we don't get a 30% reduction next year. Mm-hmm. We get, less than that. I say we never put this state money back into the budget.
So the entire $4 million?
Yeah. Never put it back in. Well, no, this would be a one.
Oh, no, but what I'm saying to you is the long-term goal
to get
no longer get grants.
Yes, no longer depend on the grants. So when we get the grants, when they come in, we use them for other things. We use them for capital projects. We use them, so we weed ourselves away from these state grants.
But is the state weaning us right now?
Yes,
is that what's going
absolutely.
On?
Yes,
Is the slow motion weaning?
Yes.
Now, doesn't that play right into their wealth redistribution scheme?
Well,
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Probably, in the long run.
Isn't that just enabling them to continue with massive wealth redistribution in the state of Connecticut?
Yeah. I understand your point. That's something that we've talked about again, but I think that going through this stress of these grants every time, it just seems to behoove us as a community not to be reliant on it, and that use that money for something, for what we need if we do get it. And I mean, in the old days, we used to have it was the Mohegan Sun money, and it's nothing now in the grant, but it used to be, we used to get $1 million from the slot machines every year, and it was the first year we got it. And the council never budgeted for it. $1 million, didn't budget. And probably after 3 or 4 years, then they budgeted, instead of $1 million, they said, okay, we'll put 200 in. And we started to become more and more dependent on it till we did it. But when we got that grant, we never used it. And then we used to use it to help with the fund balance, or we used it for a special project or something like that. So again, it's no easy answer. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, my guess is, or my forecast, what you want to call it, is that 10 years from now, the only thing you'll be budgeting in this category are the top 5 grants.
And that gives us?
You'll budget the 2 pilots, and you'll budget the veterans exemption, the circuit breaker, and the tax freeze, and that'll pretty much be it. All the rest of the grants will not be a part of your budget.
And that's not even $3 million. And that's pilot possibly continuing to go down. Yeah, probably. Our pilot going down.
It is, but that's a grant.
And I'd be willing to bet that the state revenues in 10 years will probably be 20% higher than they are today.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those grants are your tax loss grants, so those are the grants you'll probably
We keep getting.
keep getting.
We should keep letting UConn take more and more land, so then we get to the top 10, and then we get a higher grant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is that?
that's another approach.
So then what, would the percentage give us that extra few million and call it a day?
Well, you know, one of the funny things was when the governor has a proposal, you could tax hospitals.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is
And
the other
so-
thing.
So
Yeah.
we were playing with that and said, gee, if we could tax UConn, what would you do? And give you, if we had UConn Health Center and their campus on our taxable grand list rolls, we'd be adding another almost $700 million to our grand list. So you figure that against your mill rate.
I think we
Joe,
work,
that's
need to
not
work
a
on credibility.
It's an education facility.
So we're not really a hospital that we can tax. We don't make the pilot number, and we get cut with all our education. So we're as harmed as you can be.
And to the point you were making before, the 130 towns, and they keep talking about that now, which was, when you actually think about how many there are that are more alike than none, that's the number that they keep focusing on, that are being taken from. The money's to go to 38 towns, cities. So it's a huge number of towns that are having this effect in one way or another to support the cities. And it's just whittling away little by little. And I know this year we've talked with, the Board of Ed, and that we're really talking more and more about all these grants, and so we're more on board together, so to speak, with what's going on, which is great. But it's not getting any better. So back to the thing about, you're going to be looking at less and less of this money and not putting it back, because it's not something we can guarantee or expect to have.
Yeah, and actually, we do a lot of informal surveys with other towns, and in one town, it's a small town, granted, and they don't receive a lot of state grant money, but they actually, in their budget for next year, are not including any state money whatsoever. They just took it all out. It's less than $1 million for them, but still, it's a small town, it's a hit for them, but they decided that any state money that comes in will be used for, it will just roll into their fund balance or used for capital projects, and they're just not going to rely on it to help their tax situation.
Right.
So it's a pretty
Well,
bold step.
And what's not realized, I think, by so many is that you may talk $1 million in one town or $2 million, and you're talking many millions, but the significance is it's dramatic, because the budget's so much smaller, and you're having to put it on the backs of the community then, of the
Right.
citizens, so.
Right. And the other thing, just to kind of wrap something else up, is that, the state continually is trying to drive us to mismanage our budget. And it's with everything that they do, to your point, Amy, too, even about the reliance of it, is that, and I think we are going to get the 545 or whatever this year, but again, the fact that they give it to us in the end of June, where our budget is done. So again, you're gambling. That's revenue that we're coming in, and we're still making expenses. So again, they're driving us just how they're paying us. They're not giving it to us on time, and it's really, they're so against all the practices, good financial practices that we do. And so to me, again, it's the reliance of it is just driving us not in a good way, and it's so. The more we can wean ourselves from it and then use that money, if we get it, for different things, just in general, as us behind doing the financial end of it, is just a better way to do things. It's a better way to do things.
Yeah, but it's a dilemma, because honestly, if you find a way to manage this town and maintain, which is probably going to be increase in taxes, they know you're used to not getting money from them, you're not getting money from
Right.
them anymore.
Yeah.
Just
I
be
know.
realistic, like if
Yeah.
you,
Yeah,
so you have
Yeah.
to sort of pick a path, and it's not that simple.
right.
I just have a quick question. I know we've been over this exhaustively, but just for the benefit of the public, because I'm on the receiving end of communications that are sort of asking us to just ignore this governor's hit and to say, just move forward with what you have. And on one hand, I would love nothing more than to move forward with the great budgets that the school and the town gave us. So, on the other hand, we have to work with the facts as we know them. I think it's an honest way forward, is to deal with the facts as best as we know them now. So, you know, it's been reported in the press that Farmington has over a $5 million hit, you know, overall. And this budget represents a hit of $1.7 million. Can you just give the high-level couple sentence why that $1.7 million is valid to be dealing with right now?
Meaning why we should keep that?
Why we should keep it in and account for it in some way, one way or another, today.
Right. Well, I think if I understand your question, I mean, there's no indication at all that that it's getting better. And so we, right now, in this budget, have not included the pension contribution, but we have put in the whole entire amount for the governor's numbers. Much of the indication is that the pension, that may be coming in the future, but it does not look like it's going to come now. But we can't say that for certainty. I don't think it would be that drastic, but they need the money. So even if they did something with the pension, a little bit with that, and maybe didn't do as much with the grants, the outcome is still going to be at this level. I can't imagine, or worse. Every indication shows that. And so even when our legislators have come here and we've gone to the collaborative where we meet with our legislators, every indication is that you should be putting in at the minimum the grant reductions at the minimum. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that we're operating here on an honest reality, you know, as best we can, and not putting something forward that's not honest with the public, which would be to not include this grant reduction.
Right. So I think we have service charges, Joe?
Next category of service charges, it's up 2.24%. It's or $29,000. The big increase there is the tower space rentals. We have various radio towers or cell towers throughout the town that we rent space on, and that money's been consistently coming in. This year we thought we were going to lose some money, so we budgeted a lower amount. We're actually receiving the same amount this year, so we can. All the leases are in place for next year, so we're budgeting at a higher level. Everything else in that category is pretty much constant. Although, there was a question the other night about rentals at the of town property, housing the apartments. And if you look under the category called
Rentals.
housing,
Housing, okay.
$55,490 budgeted for next year. That's the amount that we're taking in for the rental of the various properties on Mountain Road, the Stone House.
What is the cost associated with maintaining them?
About $30,000.
Okay.
But this has nothing to do with the rentals, for the Board of Ed rentals,
No.
No, this is just the rental of
of our town?
The apartments.
the apartments that the town has.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
The next category is other revenues. It's a small amount, a slight decrease due to the other assessment category. We have a few very minor assessments out there that the town has levied over the years that we're collecting on. Otherwise, everything's constant. And then finally, other revenues. This is the new category this year. This is a contribution from the Westwoods Golf Course. We started it in the current fiscal year and carrying it forward for next year. It looks like it's doing well this year, and looking at a slight increase for next year in that category. That's the non-tax revenues. The current property taxes is basically what we need, the difference between what the total budget appropriation is less what the non-tax revenues are, and comes up with your current taxes. As was mentioned the other day, our grand list did have growth, depending upon who you talked to. It was either 0.59 or 0.62. So we did have growth of, and our grand list currently, our taxable grand list currently stands at almost $3.6 billion. After you factor in the tax collection rate and various abatements that are supposed to come out of it, our levy for next year would be $96 million based on the proposed, or the town manager's recommended budget. which would give you a mill rate of 26.83 mils. That's a 1.05 mil increase, or 4.1%.
Okay. All right. So we have all the information from for the budget right now. I want to just highlight a couple things, and then I want to ask Kathy what she feels about her budget and where any direction as far as the additional funds for this year. First of all, I know we talked about, Joe, I asked you about a sheet, the 2.3. If in fact we did not put in the 1.7 million that the cut that we have from the state, we would actually be at a 2.3% increase this year, which I think we certainly would all be moving forward with very quickly, and we'd be out of here in 5 minutes. But we do have that 1.7%, the 1.7% million, or the 1.7 million deduction from the state. And I think we've all been talking about how important it is to make sure that we account for that in our budget, and I feel strongly that we need to do that. We haven't been given an indication that the $3 million for the pension is something that we are assured at all that that's going to be part of this year. So if it is, it is, and we'll have to address it. But I don't think it's something we need to be putting in our budget, and I think that's why we've come to where we are. If you look at where we are, because of that change, we're at 4.1 on the budgets that we have from education in the town and the sheet of the manager's recommended budget. I would like to ask Kathy, I think that the 4.1% is really unfortunate, that as far as what we need to go to the public with, and I think we need to talk about other possibilities. I appreciate very much the fact that the Board of Ed and the town have come in where they have, but I do want to hear from Kathy as to what it means to, I'm going to say a 3.5% budget, which means $500,000. And where that would take us. So let's start there.
Okay, could we just take 1 minute?
Oh, sure.
Sure. Can I talk to you for 1 second?
Me?
Can you put this one on? Yeah, that's all I'm moving it into. Okay.
Okay,
Hey, Joe,
wait a minute.
I want to put the microphone over towards you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, John. Okay, hold on for a second. Yeah, get it right. Good?
Yeah, before we get into the weeds, I have an overall budget question, and we heard from Public Works Department and we heard from the school superintendent that there are things in play at the state level in terms of additional mandates that could be voted through that would impact their expenditure side in terms of personnel needs or staff needs or whatever. Are those types of scenarios included
Not in our budget.
in our budget?
No.
And we don't know if they're included in the town budget,
And we're the school.
the school?
Yeah. I don't know about the school, but on our budget, they're not. We're somewhat confident, like with the stormwater, that's coming down the pike, but probably not in the upcoming year. I mean, again, I think we talked about it, more resources are being used, meaning that we're shifting what people are doing to do some of the mandates, which is money and time, but nothing in this budget. This is just a maintenance budget with no additional things for that.
I think that's important context, because before we start to get in the actual numbers, it's not just a matter of maybe we'll cross our fingers and hope that we'll get some of this grant money back, which we think we won't. there are other factors outside of grants that impact our spending in the upcoming fiscal year that are not yet accounted for. And those are those unfunded mandates, which are very likely to come through both on the town and the school side. And so it's not a picture where you can just hope for some grant money back and it'll all be great. There's still stuff in here that we've not accounted for. And I won't, for the sake of the people who might be watching this later, I want to just articulate that.
Correct.
Thanks.
And I would say too, at this point, we have board people here, Chris and Christine, in that, and I think this is an understanding as we go along in our budgets, because things are so uncertain and there's the ups and downs, as you're saying, Meredith, that we don't know either. We need to have a constant conversation as we go along, even after this budget's done, about what's happening, because it's so volatile. I mean, month to month, you just don't know. So we're going to have to keep in really good communication as to what's happening as we go, because we certainly want to work together in that, you know. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, so this is, Joe and I and Erica, we worked, and this is our budget. Obviously, this is things that we came up with, and we arbitrarily, tell you what we did, was that we said a 3.5 tax increase. So I worked off of what I know, and that's the town side of the budget. And what I tried to do is say, okay, if I sharpened my pencil, I'm using those terms, and went through all the accounts and sharpened my pencil, how much money could I come up with without really hurting the service level or hurting people from not being able to do their job appropriately. So those were kind of the two things that we did. And so we went through and what I call level A, the lowest level. And I can go in detail, but we'll do the whole scenario and then we can ask questions. So, and this is sharpening the pencil. So we took $5,000 out of some patrol overtime, $3,000 out of another overtime account, $1,000 out of an overtime account, $3,000 out of a life insurance account. We brought the library down to the percentage that we are going to, in my scenario is. So the scenario like today, we're at, our percentage was 2.41. Obviously now we're going to be lower than that, so I matched that to the library. So they would get the same percentage increase as the regular town. So it's about $6,700. We deferred an unmarked lease for a patrol, not the 24-hour vehicle. So we would not replace that. Technical equipment, $3,000. Some professional services in a bunch of different accounts, the golf course, the animal control. We took $2,000, $5,000. Police building maintenance, $5,000. Grounds, $3,000. Another grounds account, $2,000. We reduced our land consultant hours, just not eliminated it, just did a slight reduction. We took a little bit out of Social Security, which was a fringe benefit. So that we went through all those accounts looking at overtime, professional services and that, and we came to $50,000. So that's where I started, trying to get to 3.5. Now the rest of this is my suggestions, obviously, and if you guys don't like it, that's your, but I wanted to start somewhere. So Joe, if maybe you can show what we came up with. Is so I took $50,000 out of mine. I then took, because we have to come up with $530,000 to come up to the 3.5%. So then I just arbitrarily took $150,000 out of the Board of Education, and I took the rest out of the capital improvements. My logic of that was somewhat the same approach in my mind for the school, maybe sharpening their pencil. Our budgets are smaller than their budgets, so again, that's the number I came up with. And I also, the logic is that I really didn't want to take everything out of the capital improvement. So I took 330. If you want, I can go through what my thoughts were with the capital improvement too. Okay. So the capital improvement, if you go, is that as you know, we received a steep grant for the Farmington Village to do lights and some different things with that, and we are also now supplementing that in our account. Let me see if I can find it. Farmington Center improvements. So we had $400,000 into that, and we found out with our steep grant, there was other things that we were gonna maybe do, a bus shelter and some different things. We found out through our grant that we can use the entire amount for the village improvements, so I don't think we need the whole $400,000, because we can use more of the steep grant, so I minused off $75,000 for the Farmington Center.
So Kathy, what would be lost? But
Nothing.
I understand you're transferring, but what was our game plan?
For some bus shelters and also maybe some more signage. But again, we are still working on how many lights we need, and we did things, so we may still be able to do some of that stuff too. So when you put the whole pot together, I think we're not gonna not do like a bus shelter or anything like that. We'd just maybe do one less, or a less sign, or when we're still working on the lights, we may not be able to do a light on a certain part. So we're still monkeying around with it a little bit. I mean, so that's why it's 75,000. That's what.
Reduction of 75?
Reduction of 75,000. The open space, which is in the engineering department, which again, none of this is great, don't get me wrong, none of this is great, is 25,000 for the open space management. That's again a new program that we would try to maintain our open space, so I took that out. The sidewalk replacement, we have some money in an account. We wanted to do a few things. I think we could hold off $25,000 for that.
Which sidewalks would that be? What was
Scheduled, if we can look. Let me have Erica look that up for you, and then we'll get
Okay.
back to it.
And Kathy, the open space, there's been so much discussion over the years on how we have all this open space and we don't maintain any of it, and we're now sometimes getting invasive species in the air.
Yep.
and so basically there would be no money to.
Only money that was in the high, yeah. Hey, again, Amy,
I'm just
none of
a-
it,
I'm
yeah,
just
none,
asking
yeah, none of this is great, but again, so these would be my suggestions.
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, what?
This is just mostly earmarked for right here outside of us, from the high school, Staples House, down to Highwood. And that's the one area down Route 4 that we have earmarked. You know, it is a system of replacement throughout town, but we've highlighted Route 4 here.
But don't we have a ton of high school kids to go down the hill and walk there to Unionville? I mean, at certain hours, I see
Yeah,
everyone walk.
it's well used, it's not dangerous, but it's well used.
Why would we intending to replace it then?
Well, because it needs to be replaced, we
So
patch
we have our
it.
students walking on the
Again,
sidewalks and it needs to be
listen,
replaced.
if you guys
Okay,
don't.
I'm just asking.
If you guys want to come to Capitol back to me, that's fine. I mean, I'm just giving
But it's the
suggestions.
sidewalks that the high school kids use to go to
Yes,
Unionville, pretty much.
yes.
Okay.
But that said, we have money in the account for other overall sidewalks, so maybe we can defer and move them around. We put money in, we bank for the sidewalks. The next thing is Farmington fire stations. We earmarked $50,000 for an architect to get on board if we're going to start doing the fire station building committee. We said instead of $50,000, $25,000. The reval, our contracts come in, and we think we can use it with the money we have this year, which is $25,000. So that would be reduced. Stonehouse, we have $50,000 to start repairs there, and we would cut that back to $25,000. Plan of Conservation and Development, we have $40,000 in, and we cut that $15,000 to make it $25,000, which should help Bill be able to do what he needs to do for the Plan of Conservation and Development. So that's on our side, that's $215,000. And we do it proportionately, and so then on the board side would be $115,000, which would bring us to the $330,000 to get to a 3.5. And again, if you ask me if all of these we need, we would like them, but if we are trying to get down to a 3.5, this is one solution, one way, and there's other items that you guys could use.
What about going beyond 3.5? Where do you see that going?
On 3.5, I did another scenario of,
Or, I mean, I'm not looking at you. if you were to go less in the town?
In the town side, yep,
What does
yeah.
it mean for you?
So then we went through again, and now this is a more than sharpening the pencil. This is now going through the accounts, and we basically focused on technical type of equipment, and this is like replacements in the highway department, smaller pieces of equipment. When things go, they replace it, things of that nature. So again, very small dollar amounts, but in numerous accounts. In the fire department, some technical equipment at $3,000, the detectives, $1,000, communication, $2,000, the fleet, the highway, $1,500, snow and ice, $5,000, street maintenance, $1,500, building maintenance, $500, grounds maintenance, $1,000, and then a big replacement copier in the engineering department to do all the maps, which needs to be replaced, is $16,000. So that comes up to about $31,000. So I would call that level B, and that between level A and level B, it comes to about $81,000 reduction. The first one was 50. This is 31. This B starts making it more difficult for people to do their jobs when, there's a piece of equipment, things like that. Obviously, if something is a safety issue, blah, 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 we'd be replacing it. But again, just going through everything and getting it, just going to each account and just taking some of the technical equipment out. So that would bring me to 81,000 between A and B.
And for your budget, we're talking about out of 29,000, million. And the Board of Eds is 65, let's say. So you've got the $50 out of a 29 and $150 out of a 65 million. And $330 out of the capital. What does that bring the capital to?
I would leave that no change on the capital.
Okay.
That, I didn't do that.
That's your next level of your.
Cuts, yeah.
And the next level for you,
The next level would be a reduction of service. Would be a reduction of service. I'd call this level C, and that would be, we would get rid of the summer help, the seasonal help. We'd get rid of the land consultant. We'd get rid of all the part-time administrative staff. We'd get rid of, we would not have the receptionist out front. So those dollars amount equal to $185,600, and you would absolutely see a reduction of
Well, that's
service.
staff.
Of that. So that's A, B, and C. That brings us to $267,300. That would be that, and then anything after that would be full-time people.
what is the, when we're at 3.5, and what I meant by that was the bottom line, where the 4.1.
Yeah.
With the reductions, the A and the first one for the BOE, what does that bring? What percentages does it bring you both to?
For A?
Yeah.
So that would be, up here, it would be 2.37 for the education, 2.24 for the town. That's up on my scenario.
Okay. And that brings us to a 3.5 on the bottom.
Yeah, if you do something similar to that with the capital, cutting 330 out of the capital, what you guys would take whatever you want.
Okay.
I actually appreciate it spread around in sort of force pots, so to speak, so it's not a devastating impact to one specific area.
Yeah.
Although it's all painful. I mean, that's the frustrating part, is that every single thing is painful. This is the consequence. This is what the governor's budget, and this is happening in many, many, many places. in
Right,
Connecticut.
and again,
It hurts.
we've worked, it's unfortunate because we've worked really hard on the capital budget and we've been keeping it up. This does not have our policy, it's at 2.33% instead of 2.5. That said, though, we have had good, very solid capital budgets, but we need these different things. Even the things that I'm recommending is difficult. And on the town side, we've worked really hard not to take the accounts down like this sharpening the pencil, because then we wind up not having what we need. But again, we're in drastic, we lost 30% of our revenue. And if that's, you may have to do something like that.
What's frustrating about this slide, and I know I'm just preaching to the choir, but what we've got here is a tax increase larger than our residents have seen in years and years, and they're getting less for it. I mean, the consequence of what's going on the state level is we're paying significantly more and we're getting significantly less. It's just a really crappy place to be.
Joe, can you remind me, I know we've been planning for years, debt maintenance is going to go up and capital is pretty much where it's going to go down. And I've been planning that we have 2 years that it's going to be super frugal. Those 2 years are coming. So if we don't do things, basically what we don't do with capital this year, realistically could be pushed 3 years down the road. And if we have to decide to do the high school, who knows when we're going to get to it. Is that an accurate assessment? I mean, we're not going to have the same money for capital. So if we don't take care of the sidewalks, or if we don't take care of the open space, realistically, we may not be looking at these for quite some time.
You would delay these,
Significant.
you probably would be delaying projects 2 to 3 years out.
And that's assuming high school or no?
I'm not assuming high school.
Right, so that's
at
just
all.
assuming
I'm just
paying for the
assuming
water
what we're-
treatment.
Right, what we're doing now.
So, okay. So the capital stuff is not just pushing to next year, because next year it's $1 million less than the year after, right?
Yeah, it's definitely, the capital is,
Capital's huge.
Yeah.
It's a huge hit.
yeah, it's difficult.
What's the overall tax increase then? 2.7 to, we're going from if we had our budget, we would be at 2.7, now we're going to 3.5, so it's 0.8 of an increase. So we're going to be,
You lost me. Yeah.
if we had the budget that we wanted
Okay.
this year, it would be 2.7, correct?
No,
2.3.
2.2.
Or, I mean.
2.3,
right,
yeah,
right,
2.3.
Right,
Yeah, I think the budget, let's see if I have that.
I got my facts.
No, the tax percent change would have been 2.2, though,
Right.
tax. Not overall, but tax.
I'm sorry, I do have that. That would be
It's
your
the two.
tax increase if you had flat state funding.
Right, okay. I had the wrong page. Sorry about that.
I mean, where we've gone, again, is paying significantly more and
Right,
getting
right.
less.
Yep.
Well, one of the things I think, to be quite honest, I was hoping that we could go to 3. And it just doesn't, I don't want to cut services like we would have to go there. So just talking about a 3.5, I think, is I think that we have to look at this. I'm not comfortable with a 4.1 at all, I'll tell you right now. I appreciate the Board of Ed and the town and the numbers that you came in at. And fortunately, we would have been at the 2.3, which would have been wonderful. These grant cuts, I think we have to make sure they're in our budget, because that's only the beginning, I believe. And, but 4.1, I think, is too high for our community. And I think with the other things we have going on, like the high school, and with the sewer coming on, and the possibility of other projects we want to do in the schools with the other committee that we had, and looking at all over town, I mean, that's all more money and more for the taxpayer. So to me, a 4.1% is, and it's not something the community, as was mentioned before, has seen in the last few years at all, maybe in the last 10 years, other than that one reval year at 9.9. I think it was 2008 that we had the last, or 7. But in any event, I think these cuts well, first of all, we have to realize that this is still, we talk about increases or decreases. This is still an increase of 1.5 for the Board of Education and 600, put my glasses on, 631 for the town. So those are still increases in the budgets, and I think significant dollars, which I know we could use more. I know the board, as does the town, has already made reductions in the budgets that come in from requests, whether it's the department heads and the departments in the town as well. So I know it goes through those channels first to get to where we are today. So, just to cut to the quick, I'm happy with a 3.5 increase. I think that our community to take 500 out of where we were and still have an increase of, what would the number be? 2 million, well, 1.5 for the board and 630 for the town, I think is still meeting the needs of our community and maintaining services. I think it within the board's budget, the 150 is more than the 50 with the town. Budgets are different. You're looking at a $65 million or a $29 million budget. But also, I think there are a couple of new initiatives with the board that that are in there that unfortunately may not go through this year, but that won't have an effect on class size and other things in there. So I hope that, I'm comfortable with the 3.5. So
Nancy,
we can have conversations.
Is it possible to have the Board of Ed representation do very much what Kathy just did? I mean, if there 150,000 cut to their budget plus capital is going to be cut, I'd like to hear from them. I mean, I know we can't decide on line items, but I think that's relevant. I mean, it's your call. I don't feel like I have all my complete information to make a decision.
Well, we've talked about this, though, in years past, and I don't, usually what you say, that you can't tell us without a Board of Education,
That would be correct. I'd be remiss to make any representations, Amy, without talking to Kathy and the
Right,
entire board.
but you made a representation, and I actually have a lot of respect for you, and I trust you that you took this very seriously to give a maintenance budget and to go flat and to come in low. And that was important to hear from you. You didn't tell me that we were going into muscle. We were just going basics. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't feel like I'm doing my job if I don't know the details.
Oh, I don't disagree with your question, your inquiry. I just.
No, you can't do it alone.
Present you with anything without talking with Kathy and the entire board as to making any representations as to what, as Kathy just did, sharpening the pencil and that, give you tier A, B, C, whatever. I can't do that.
No, I know. I feel like what Kathy did was very helpful. I know
Okay.
I'm making a decision on sidewalks or open space or with what we did at the Gateway Commission. I have no idea what I'm making a
No,
decision
and I
on with you.
appreciate it. I mean, I know the question, the inquiry is valid, absolutely.
Meredith?
One of the, maybe it would help us, one of the things the superintendent said repeatedly when she presented to us was that she had room and opportunity in her self-insurance fund to, at least account for anything that might be adjusted on the operating side for the schools. Is there a way that we can know what that opportunity is? Because she did say repeatedly she had room there. Do we know how much room she has there? I don't know if we can get into their account.
I don't think we can say how much room there is, but the self-insurance fund overall is doing well. So again, it would be their policy choice of, how much they would like to go into the self-insurance fund, but I think there is definitely room if that's what they choose to do.
I wrote it down because I thought she was making a point to tell us that she did have opportunity, there in operating, but I don't know how much opportunity.
I clearly I'm always looking for the detail. And if I'm going to make a decision to cut something, I need to know what I'm cutting. I can't go blind. I'm not doing my job otherwise. I feel it's completely arbitrary. So I can't just go based on a number. But that doesn't matter. I mean, there's only two of us.
Yeah. Meredith, maybe being in the insurance industry, a well-performing self-insurance fund and opportunity, I bristle a little bit only because you don't know what's coming. We have a well-performing year. We have a couple of catastrophic claims, but I would like to obviously talk to Kathy and the board,
Yeah.
but before going after that money.
You've got time to go, yeah.
If I might comment on the insurance piece of this, the reason we set up insurance policy is because boards of education were rating the fund in prior years to make up differences like this. That's one of the reasons why we sat down and created a policy describing when monies could be removed from the insurance fund.
Correct.
So for us to be assuming that the Board of Education now has that money available would violate the policy we've
Right.
set.
Well, we're not assuming because the superintendent sat there and told us.
Right.
It's the,
But it would still violate the policy we've set. And we said it for this exact reason.
Well, she wouldn't be violating her policy if they were over 125% at the end of the day.
That's correct.
And
We
maybe,
don't know.
maybe we will be as we go along, you know, and we get farther out in the year. That may be something that we can look to, even in June when we hear more information. Or October, as I said, that's what we keep hearing, you know. And my thought was too, not that going blind, because we can't, obviously, people know, or they should know, or can by my conversation now, we can't go in and cut anything in your Board of Education budget. But my thinking overall is that when we went through, and I have to say how much I appreciate and respect us going through the budget like we do with you and like we did yesterday. Not yesterday, Thursday. But it's just such an open, we have, more than ever, have such an open relationship and back and forth and talking about what does it mean and how was the special ed, you know, attended to, how is that going to be dealt with, and what were, everything from the technology report to, you know, the equipment, and I mean, it was very, I thought, a really good flow of what was going on and what the possibilities were. And I guess I can say through the what our conversation was on Thursday, as is with Kathy today, in telling us there are different places, and I'm trying to make a point with the fact that it's what the size of the budget is and what the deduction would be at this point, or less of an increase. Listening to all the conversation about what's in your budget, too, as what's in Kathy's. There's never an easy piece, but it seems as though there are pieces that were new this year that maybe have to wait till next year. And that's not necessarily, that's not teachers. There were other things in it that, you know, for 150, in the proportion of the budget might be, you know. So that's why I can, with the 3.5, I think I'm comfortable.
I think what I think what we're working towards here is something that's not arbitrary. I think your sentiment, Nancy, comes from not wanting to put 100% of the governor's hits on our homeowners. We can't just shrug and say, okay, we'll absorb it all. You know, that doesn't seem right. And so it's finding that number that doesn't shove 100% of this hit on our homeowners, but also does not impact people and kids. You know, I don't think, nobody up here wanted to touch this at all in any way, but circumstances out of our control laid a huge hit in our laps. And I think the number has to be one that's not arbitrary. The unarbitrariness of it is, at what point can we not pass 100% of this on to our homeowners, but can we also not impact programs and services? And I think Nancy's comfort level with the 3.5 is that's where that is. As she said, if you get lower, if you start to come down to 3, that's when you're impacting programs and services, and that's not something that I'm hearing she's comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with that either. So I think we're right on that edge. I think and that's a good starting point for now, is to do something with the reality we have without hurting programs and services. And the problem for me is what happens next. I mean, that is out of our control. If it gets worse for us, I think we might be in programs and services territory, but I'd like to not go there today. And I think the job of the council and the town moving forward is to get our state rep on the phone and make sure that we don't have to go there, because that's where all of this is happening. It's not happening here, it's happening there. And I think that's where we need to put our advocacy efforts. So if we could reach a level today where we're not impacting people or kids, but neither are we just saying, yeah, we're going to take whatever they give us and shove it onto our homeowners, I'm not comfortable with that either. So for me, the 3.5, it's not arbitrary. It's that perfect point where we're not creating catastrophe in any one area. That's my perspective.
And I think it was mentioned many times about us being responsible and us being, as a council. And I think this is being responsible, that we can't just bring that and put that on the backs of our taxpayers, as Meredith mentioned, and all of us different people have mentioned, but I think it's very important for us, for all the community, to talk to your legislators, to talk to the people in Hartford and say, you have to be thinking about Farmington. Year after year, we are very focused on being fiscally responsible and efficient, running an efficient town. And we're the ones that, I use the word again and again, we're punished. And so I think we are trying to be responsible, and we are being responsible by not putting it on just on the backs of the community. And right now, I think this is I wouldn't want to go farther, because then I think it's if at some point we're cut another couple $1 million, we're going to have to revisit how we do things. But right now, I think we can do this in a way that is not that deep, and allows us to have a tax rate that we can stand behind for now.
And if you read the news, you've got West Hartford laying off teachers, you've got our neighboring towns taking zeros. I feel like what Farmington works overtime at is still providing our board and town with increases in this situation. And we're probably the lone man standing doing that still in this scenario. I mean, what we have is the Board of Ed coming, we're still within the target range we set for the Board of Ed at the outset. We've not reneged on them at all. We were at 225 to 275, and we're still right there. I think that we can still provide the board and the town with increases is unique among towns like us right now. And I just hope it sticks. I hope it just sticks. And again, that's up to our state legislator in large part.
John?
Kathy, I just have a question for
Sure.
you. How long have you worked for the town of Farmington?
23 years.
How long have you been town manager for?
This will be my 17th budget.
17 years. So with that, I want to say thank you. Okay? Because you have done a fantastic job managing this town, managing our finances, managing our services, your people. Everyone I talk to loves you. You do a good job. You're an inspiration. You're a true leader. And, I sit up here and I look back at that wall, and sometimes I look at it after the meetings, and I'm looking at about 100 years of leadership in the town of Farmington. Strong leadership, solid leadership. They're all right there for everybody to see, and it's a privilege and an honor for me to sit up here and be on that wall as well. So I take everything that I do up here very serious, because I sit on the shoulders of giants who are all there. And this town represents their hard work and their leadership, their responsibility to the citizens, to the residents of this town. And we all live in a wonderful, wonderful, amazing town because of it, raising wonderful, wonderful, amazing children because of this town. And that's because of the leadership that has been displayed in this town. And you have been at the helm of that leadership for the last 17 years. And I want to say thank you for that. And I think there's a lesson to be seen here, that leadership matters. And I take umbrage to a comment that was made earlier, that we're just go with what is proposed, otherwise you're not showing leadership. I mean, that's crazy. I think this is a year where everybody needs to take a step back and focus and see that elections have consequences and leadership matters. When you're at the ballot box in November, just think about that. Look at who the true leaders are in the state of Connecticut, in the towns, the results that they have provided, and really think long and hard about is it working in Farmington? If it is, continue electing the people and the leaders that you're putting in Farmington into office. Is it working at the state of Connecticut? If it is, continue putting those leaders into office. And if it's not necessarily working, maybe it's time to just take a long, hard thought. We're in a very, very difficult position right now because of, quite frankly, poor fiscal management at the state of Connecticut level for decades. And we live in exponential times. You heard this speech last year or the year before from me, exponential times. It's true. You look at any graph, any chart, and they are all exponential from 1900 to now. You've got a flat line, and then about 1984, everything goes up, whether it's the Dow Jones Industrial Average, inflation, or Moore's Law in computer processing power. It's all exponential. And we're at the peak of that right now. So changes have to be made. They absolutely have to be made. The way that we do business has to change. It's unsustainable where we're at right now. We're talking about future revenues and future grants and whatnot, and, changes have to be made. One of the things that the governor likes to say a lot is shared sacrifice. Well, he says shared sacrifice quite a bit, but I haven't seen much sharing in the sacrifice. It's put on the backs of the taxpayers is what shared sacrifice means. I'm not seeing a lot of cutting to services or reining in, sharpening of the pencil or reining in spending that's unaccounted for at the state level. Here in the town of Farmington, we run a very, very tight ship, a very tight budget, both on the town side and the Board of Education side. There's not much there. There's not much room. And there's a reason for that. It's because we work really hard at that. And it's because there's leaders in positions that make these, sometimes hard decisions, and sometimes they're really not that hard decisions. They're just common sense decisions. So, yeah, I think a 3.5 is high. It's unfortunate. A 2.3 sure looks a lot better than a 3.5. I find it curious that both the town and the board were able to come in so low this year, whereas they weren't in other years. But that's another story for another time. But I'm gonna support this 3.5 level if the rest of the board or the rest of the council is around there. But I just think it's really time to take a hard look at leadership across the board and see what's working and see what isn't working. And I'm talking to the residents, at home at the town of Farmington and to the residents of the state of Connecticut. And it's not this isn't a political advertisement for the Republican Party. It's really just me getting very, very frustrated with what I'm seeing. And we need reforms in a lot of areas. Pension reform being a great place to start. Because this is just unsustainable. So again, I want to thank you, Kathy, for your leadership. And Superintendent Greeter's not here, but I want to thank Superintendent Greeter as well for her leadership. She does a phenomenal job at the Board of Education. She does a phenomenal job running a school district that just is giving my children, an education, more of an education than I could ever ask for, certainly more than I ever got. And so really the town of Farmington is doing it right. And it's a shame that, like it's been said, we're being punished for responsible behavior and irresponsible behavior is rewarded. I know I joked about it a couple times the other night, but it's really not a joking matter the more I sit and think about it. So, I just, it's frustrating. It's frustrating for us all. But I will support the 3.5% where we're at, and work very hard to budget and start working on the changes that need to be made. But I do feel strongly that we can't just enable irresponsible behavior. We have to challenge it. We have to knock on the doors of our state legislators, call the governor's office, whatever it may be, keep our lobbying groups that we're parts of knocking on their doors as well, and not roll over and not enable irresponsible behavior. But I think putting forth the 3.5% budget right now is responsible. We're quote unquote sharing the sacrifice by sharpening the pencil a little bit on one side and unfortunately increasing the taxes on the other side to help cover those deficits. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
So I'd like to start out by understanding that we asked the town and we asked the Board of Education to come in with budgets that would maintain the current level of services. And they did that. Both bodies came in within the numbers we were looking for, and it translated to a 4.1 increase in taxes. And now we're having this sort of dramatic overreaction because 4.1 is such a huge number. Just so everybody understands that in the last 20 years, we've had budgets increases or tax increases of 4% or more 6 of those 20 years. And if we just look back to Kathy Egan's tenure, we've done it 6 times in 17 years. So having a budget increase of 4% isn't a huge change. It's a fairly normal thing. It's barely more than our average over the 20-year period. When we look at a 3.5 number, arbitrarily moving down from maintaining current services, arbitrarily moving down, we come up with a mill rate which is still the lowest in the Farmington Valley. So we can take that increase and still maintain our position as the lowest taxed town in the Farmington Valley. When we talk about the impact to our residents, and we're looking at the 4.1%, meaning everybody has to pay $20 more a month. So now we're going to drive it down to 3.5, so they only have to pay $17 a month. We're not talking about a big change. What we're talking about is drama. You know, making the residents know that we took this huge step in moving their tax bill down from $20 a month to $17 a month. You know, I feel that what we asked our town to do and what we asked the Board of Education to do was to come in with a budget that maintained our level of services. I think both bodies did that, and I think that we should approve the budget that implements their plan. And that's the 4.1 tax increase, the way it was originally laid out. And I think that decreasing that to a 3.5 increase is just a show. Thank you.
Just, go ahead,
oh.
Peter, go ahead.
First, I'll talk about the budget. I don't like the position we're in. I didn't like when I saw a 3-1 or a 4-1. I thought as an elected official that I need to take responsibility to people in this town who do not have the means to support that extra $20 a month also, and even $17 a month. And then there's a lot of households in this town who it's not going to be $20 a month, it might be $100 a month. So I look at this and I think we need to protect our taxpayers from these giant increases that are coming from us from the state of Connecticut. So that's why I will support a 3.5%, because we're taking some of this tax burden off of them. And the town will have to raise taxes to 3.5% from where we were at 2.3. We came in at 2.3. With how the state is jammed this down our throat is not responsible in just 1 year. I felt that if they maybe thought about this for subsequent years and maybe had a plan, it might have been more doable, but I'm not in favor of that either, because they supposedly, on the pension sides, have taken on and agreed to uphold the pension liability for the teachers. I'm just jumping all over the place here because there's just so much information here, but I think how Kathy has made her cuts to get us to 3.5 is very responsible. I don't think it's arbitrary. I think she sharpened her pencil and kind of skimmed the surface. I don't think I don't think we'll have any cutbacks in services or programs, and our residents are still going to they're still going to wake up and see their streets plowed, and the mead fields will all look great in the end. And we're still giving an increase on the other hand. On the averages, you know, John, you mentioned that, but on our 5-year averages, we're at 2.7, 10-year 2.99, and then the 17.36. I don't take this as being drama or anything. I take this seriously when I have to make these cuts. I don't want to do it, but we got to do it. I don't like being in this position at all. I think our state legislators should be all over this. I wish they were here today for our budget hearings, to hear it firsthand. So I'm not going to keep rambling on, but I'll support the 3.5%, and I just hope in the next couple of months, we're not back here again making even more devastating cuts.
I first want to start this, and I try to do this every year, is in addition to thanking the town and the Board of Ed and the superintendent, thank my colleagues. We may not all agree, but this is a volunteer gig, and you've all dedicated an enormous amount of time over the years, and especially over this week, for the sole reason because you actually care about this town. And I am as a resident and as someone who benefits from this town, as a mother, as a businesswoman here, I really appreciate your efforts. And whether I disagree or agree with your processing, I just want that to be conveyed. I don't think people always realize how much all of our town volunteers do. And it's not just town council and TPZ and human relations, but I just want to thank you for your time because it's huge. As for this budget, as one council person, every time I look at anything, and every time I look at the budget, there's two things I look at. One, as you all know, I'm pretty fiscally conservative or responsible. My feeling is if I'm going to take Paula's dollar that she's worked hard and she's going to give it to me in taxes, I'm going to make sure that I use that carefully. So that in this town, we know being careful with dollars matters. So that's my first thing. My second thing is, what does my town want? And I do my best to try to understand, what is my town looking for? West Hartford may have a different vision. In Farmington, what we know is people are relatively content if we maintain what we have. And what our town wants is maintained. They don't want cutting into the muscle. They want us to be fiscally responsible and try to maintain. So when I was looking at the budget, that's what I was looking for. We asked both the town side and we asked the board side, give us a bare bones maintenance budget here. Many of my questions and many of my colleagues' questions went directly to that. Are we doing cost sharing? Are we doing regionalization? Is there any waste? Are we adding new programs? When I was done listening, my sense was that this was pretty much flat. I was thrilled that at the end it was a 2.3%. So that's sort of generally what I heard. I am not happy about the state. I don't know if I've conveyed that properly. None of us are happy, okay? I'm not willing to throw rocks at any political crowd right now. There's a lot out there we could throw at. I care about Farmington right now. That's why we're here, and I care about one thing. I care about Farmington and what we need to do with Farmington. My take overall was that 4.1% was the number we needed to maintain. And the 3.5 was arbitrary. It was that, we've looked at the numbers, we're just not comfortable with it. We'd be comfortable with 3.5, 4.1 we can't stomach. And that removed from the maintenance and the fiscal responsibility. It just seemed arbitrary, and I wasn't comfortable with that. So I asked repeatedly of Kathy Egan and Kathy Greeter, what would go? And I appreciate very much today that we heard from Kathy Egan what would go on the side of the town. Sharpening the pencil on the operating seemed kind of reasonable. What makes me not want to support this budget on the town side, capital improvements, we all know. We've been bombarding Joe for years. The next couple of years are going to be bad. We're cutting at least $1 million from capital improvements, and that's ignoring what we have in our 5-year plan. So to cut these programs on capital improvements, it doesn't seem smart. A sidewalk, it sounds funny, but a sidewalk or $75,000 on all the work we've done with Gateway or open space. We have a third of our town is open space, and we're not going to do anything to try to maintain it. That's not taking care of things. So when I listened to Kathy, I wasn't comfortable with the capital cut. The operating, I appreciate the sharpening of the pencil. The other issue I have with supporting this 3.5, honestly, is I'm not doing my job because I have no idea what the Board of Ed is intending to do. And Nancy, with all due respect, I understand we can't touch their numbers, but we spend an entire afternoon and evening going through every one of those lines. I need to understand what that impact is going to be. And I can't go on maybe they'll pull from self-insurance, or maybe this year less people are going to come in August and we won't need those two. I don't feel like we're being responsible, and I do feel personally that we're being arbitrary. The other piece is, yes, it's a lousy year, I'm not happy with what's going on with the state, but this is different than anything before, and part of me feels like we need to hear from our public and what do they want us to do. We know generally what they want us to do, but right now, do they want to maintain or do they not want to maintain? I feel like this is the situation we need to go to our public. If they say, hey, no, 4.1 is too much, we're not cool with it, I am happy to come here and dedicate 10 more hours of volunteerism with all of you to change it. But I don't think it's fair for me to read the mind of the public in this situation, because this is something brand spanking new. So I can't support it, partly because of the Capitol, partly because I'm blind to Board of Ed, and I just don't think it's fair for me to guess what 15,000 potential voters are going to do. In previous years, I could do my job. This year, I mean, it's 1.7 million that we don't know what's happened. So I'm not comfortable. I don't feel like we've done sufficient due diligence to go to 3.5. But thank you for all your help.
Other.
That's my turn. This is my second year here doing budgets with everybody. Very, very tough year. I'd like to thank Kathy and everybody from the town and everybody from the Board of Ed. I'm sure you worked even more hours than we have on these budgets. I'm in favor of 3.5. I feel down the road we're going to have many more increases coming. We don't know where we stand with teachers' pensions. I'm also very concerned about a high school project coming up and increases to people's tax roll then. If we keep on increasing every time we look at a budget, in the long run, our seniors, people on Social Security, are not going to be able to afford to stay in this town. It's hard. I mean, I have the customers that come to my store every day. They barely make by as it is now. So I would try to keep our budget as low as possible. I'm definitely in favor of 3.5. Thank you.
Can I just bring
Sure.
one thing up? It's somewhat relevant. Chris, since we have you here, maybe you can just speak to this to the best of your ability. The question that I asked last Thursday in regards to the pre-spending, and I asked for 5 years. We got 3 years back, which I'm appreciative of. But it looks like basically it's an average of about $50,000 a year for pre-spending, which I got 47,000, 59,000, and 50,000. Can you explain what exactly that is, if you know?
I mean, I'd like to just, I received that, I'd like to just go back and talk to Kathy to make a, the valid representation to you, John. I mean, it's just certain things at the end of the year where the board was, Kathy had some additional funding were allowed to be spent in other areas, but if you wanted to, let it go to Kathy and get it, a truly responsive answer to it, I will.
Okay, so when you say additional funds, you mean that's just funds that didn't get spent, and you had them left over per se, and so they were available, and so you used them to purchase items for the future, for the next year that possibly were cut out of a budget that had just passed the council level. Safe to say?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And we need motions for whatever we're going to fill in.
I need
Do we
3
need to
seconds to just.
do we need,
That's just what historically has been done. I mean, you probably could just do the very last one.
but the one about setting the
Maybe we need
October, April 17th, which, do we do it in a certain order? Yeah. Okay, so we do that first, that's all in it. We do this one first. Okay.
So I've got town debt, Board of Ed, and final. Should I do all of those individually, Paula?
And capital.
Okay.
Capital too.
Kathy,
It's not one motion?
She could do one motion, then.
Oh, capital.
Right?
I can do them all individually, and then,
You could do it, read it all as one motion, but you got it, usually you're specific about what you're cutting.
Right.
What do you mean?
freezing. Are you freezing?
We're going to give a percent?
No heat coming out, Kathy.
Time to go.
She wants us
Already
out of here.
started. Already started.
That's what that.
Yeah, that's got cut. We're going to use me every time.
Yeah, I read them each separately. How we
Should we
usually
vote
do.
on them each separately?
You have in the past.
Or should,
Have in the past.
okay, and then
Yeah.
do one final one with a vote?
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's here too.
All right, so
Yeah,
we'll
so
just,
I-
we'll just do all
Yeah,
of
so I'd
this.
start, let's see.
Can I start with capital?
I would start, yeah, start.
Capital Town,
Yep.
Board of Ed debt, I might just
Yeah.
reverse these.
Yeah.
All right, and you know, before I read these motions, I just have to be honest that I don't think this is the end of it. In either way, I think if we're pleasantly surprised and we get money back, we can reallocate it. I think that's within our power, and I think if we get an unpleasant surprise, this will continue. I actually don't think this is the end. It's just my perception. Okay.
Well, and the 2.3, the amount that we got cut from the state came after when we did our targets. That was after the fact.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion, so I'm going to start with capital, to set the capital improvement plan budget for fiscal year 17-18 at $2,398,000, or a 16.06% decrease below the current year's budget.
Second.
Freezing. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Poll the board, or council, excuse me.
From which end?
Go ahead.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Next.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to set the town operating budget for the fiscal year 2017-2018 at $28,860,794, which is an increase of $631,423, or 2.24%.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Start.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Okay. All right, Board of Ed. I move to set the Board of Ed budget for the fiscal year 2017-2018 at $64,172,641 for an increase of $1,486,566, or 2.3% over their current year budget. 2.37% over the current year budget.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Poll, go ahead.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Okay. Debt. I move to set the fiscal year 2017-2018 debt service budget at $7,315,700, which is an increase of 7.15% over the current year's budget.
Second.
Oh, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Abstentions?
You're voting nay on the debt?
Oh, the debt, I'm sorry. No, we're voting yes on the debt. I'm sorry.
Go down the
Can
road.
you poll the board, please?
Okay.
This is just debt.
The debt is
This
just-
is the debt.
Yeah, the debt's the debt. Oh, so aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 All right, you guys are going to have to bear with me for this one. This is a heck of a mouthful. All right, final motion. I move to set the Town of Farmington fiscal year 2017-2018 budget for the Board of Education at $64,172,641, or a 2.37% budget increase above the fiscal year, and the town budget at $28,860,794, or a 2.24% increase above the current fiscal year, and the debt service at $7,315,700, or a 7.15% increase above the current fiscal year, and the capital improvement plan budget of $2,398,000, or a 16.06% decrease below the current fiscal year, resulting in a total expenditure of $102,747,135, or a 2.13% increase over the current fiscal year's budget.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Poll the council.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Okay. Then, so that's it.
Now we have
I
to
have
do
another
the-
one. Not done.
Yep.
All right. I move to approve the warning of the April 17th, 2017 annual town meeting and the April 27th, 2017 referendum.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'll remind you, you have to sign this before you leave.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That's it.
That's it.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?